Hello, listeners. Hi, my name is Madhavi, and I'm so happy to have you on UppTalk. You have come to the right place if you want to learn about IT and do really cool things with your hands. We are not just another IT company when I say UppTalk. Think of us as your learning partner dedicated to helping you reach your full potential. We have top notch hands on courses to help you build your business, whether you are new to technology or want to move up in your current job. Let's look around this as our first step towards learning.
Let's come back and do the machine. Can you please explain me that split functions once again? Split function. Split function is basically used for breaking your single batch document into individual records. Because maybe your target application does not allow you to send everything, like does not allow you receiving everything at once. It wants you to push each record individually. In that scenario, we utilize split function, where what it does is it will take the batch document, split each row into a single document. And then it allows us to control how we are splitting in BME. Again, based on profile type, it will happen. In our CSV file, we can either do split by line or split by profile. Basically, split by line is it will take this whole thing as just one row. Each line is treated as one single document. In the first line as column header, what it will do is take this line and consider it always as column headers. That is a use case of it, basically. And you know, when you do not want to run the whole batch document at once. You want to let the documents run individually, one by one. That is the basic point of having a split shape. Similarly, again, if you are having XML profile employee, you can set it up on employee basically like this. Suppose we are getting like 10 employees, 10 employee inside this whole file. It will break it for you into individual XML document. That's how this works. Anik, did you understand? I also have one question, Rishid. When we set the property, there are multiple options. We have like profile, type, word, dynamic process property, and different options. Can you explain the options like when we use this? Like I know some of them, like when we use profile type and data, pass through some of them, but I'm not clear about all of them. You're talking about this one. Set properties one or which one? I saw the same thing in set property one. This one you're talking about. Yes. First one is your connector call. Basically, setting up a connection and doing a lookup from another application. That is about connector call. Suppose you will set up everything. Your connection action, operation, input, output, and then input. You can choose whatever the data is coming in from the previous shape, the profile data, or anything. Again, if you do not want to end up calling the other system, you can simply have cross-reference lookup. That is your CRT table that I was talking that we practiced yesterday. You can choose your CRT table here. Instead of something like this, I have a question. We are using cross-reference lookup here. We don't need to use it in mapping. No use case is different here and there. In mapping, you are doing data transformations. Heavily here, you cannot set that value for that field directly. You will only be able to set it in a property and then reuse that property to set the value for that field. Whereas in map, you can directly set this value from the CRT cross reference lookup directly for the field. That is the difference. Why we need that when we can directly add value to map? Majorly, if you are using these kind of values and properties, they are set up for logical checks, comparisons, business logics, not for data transformations. You set up for a field, you set up this property which holds another value. You will be using it for comparison against some other field, value, or something else. That is the use case of this here. Then we have current data. Current data brings in anything up until the previous shape point. Whatever the data is flowing, it will bring out everything. We primarily use it in a message shape or something like that, where we want to modify the format of our message. We just want to add some additional lines or something, customize it. Then we use this current data. It is like that, like I want to send message in my message employee name, I can use it. But then again, it could not just be employee name that is coming in. Say you have all your employees' information coming in, But when you want to send it to some application of business email or something, you want to add few more lines. Something like this data belongs to this organization and this is for this project or something like that. You write those two lines and you add this parameter current data. There you can have a mix up of multiple things that way. Got it. Then you can also have options of date time. Again, you can choose this format for date time or you can enter something of your own based on your business logic, whatever you are writing up. Now about these date types, you can simply go by current date, which is basically your existing system timestamp. You can use that either in like starting or towards the end of your process. That is the use case about this one. Then I will come to this later. Last run date, you use this when you have scheduled your integration. Let me explain it here. You have your integrations hours and one where it takes employees data daily and daily. Am reading scheduled for 7 am. Now your integration is scheduled for 7 am to run, but it does not know from when it needs to pick up the data every day in its search. If you have not defined the date parameter for it, it will end up fetching everything again and again every day morning. You restrict it using database filters. This kind of thing is called delta runs in Boomi. Delta run is nothing but basically setting up some date filters on your process to only fetch records since last run. Does it make sense? Yes, it does. Boomi allows you to choose last run date, last successful run date. Last run date is it will capture the rate regardless if your integration execution is successful or not. And successful run date will only be capturing your date when the process is successfully executed. Then you have a relative date. I have a question. It was related to last successful run date. If we have this option of last successful run date, we will probably use this most of the time instead of last run date. Yes, majority times. But sometimes we also use last run date where we are not much bothered by the success or failure of process. We just want it to run every day. For example, for the process, we can say which run after a certain type of interval or a multiple time of day. We don't really bother if one of which fails because we design it with such failure, with such design error handling mechanism. Even if it fails, it will pick up everything. Again, use case gets a bit different. But basically code is I cannot bother. If it's success or fail, we just want it to run. Suppose, say, you are refreshing currency rates every few hours, something like that. There, you don't need to be bothered by it being successful once again because it's already fetched once and currency rates are refreshed every day only. That is something like a use case for it. Then you have relative date. Where you can set it to plus or minus, subtracting days, hours, minutes, seconds, weeks, months, years. Basically, it allows you to handle scenarios where you want to perform past dated or future dated calculations. It could be related to building up queries for some past information, or you set this up first for some future dated reports to be automatically generated. Sometimes we use this vary. I think I've hardly used this once, twice, or thrice. This feature relative date one. When we were we had 3 or 4 applications, and all of them were running in different time zones. Like different countries, as to match the time frame around our data filters and everything and what we are sending you target. We use these relative dates to adjust the time that is being printed in the target record. That is the use case of this relative date. Also, sometimes you don't want to set up this last run date, last successful run date. You can use relative date also, like when you're scheduling your integration. You do not want to depend upon these two. Once your integration is executed, you always want to suppose your integration is executing today. You just want it next time it is running. You have not scheduled your integration. Think it like this. It's aid. It comes on an ad hoc request from your business that whenever we want the team to trigger it, you just click on it. What your integration does is generate some business report, basically get some data from some one or two applications. It will generate a CSV file and place it in some SFTP. They say, whenever we want you to run it, it should pick up data from past 1 week's data only. For the date filter, but now you cannot schedule that integration. In those scenarios, this comes in handy, where you will simply just set up here something like this -7 days and leave this set this one, that whenever you're running integration, you can use the property from here of allowing it to pick data only for the previous 7 days. That is the common use case of it. Moving on. Document cache lookup again. You can choose your cache. Choose cache index, basically on which value you want to perform the check for, and then output. You can choose your cache per app from the cache lake. For the incoming data in the cache, we'll perform your lookup and take the out reference value and output for this document and just reuse it. Again, it's not necessary. All these values are for set properties only. They can come in even for the message shape or any other shapes also. It's just I'm explaining it on this. Even in your decision shape, you have all this. Property values are like generic. They're not restricted for each of the kept it common. It's for us to utilize which one when. Then again, document properties about either the connector level properties. Again, we haven't set up any connected it. We haven't gone there. But again, you can set up something like this. Suppose mail connector, something file name from address, host message, ID subject to address, all these kind of things. Otherwise, you can select dynamic document property, which we did here. We had set up a dynamic document property. Document level, you can do that. Otherwise, you also have your execution properties where it's about account ID item name, document count. It's more at your process level. Sometimes you just want this kind of information in your target system. Just for your report or something, or just for audit trail purpose. You can get all this information generated using this. Next, we have dynamic process property. Dynamic process property is something like global variables. Basically, if you set it up in your integration at one place. Remember in starting I explained you're fetching this employee data from some system and pushing it to another system. Where in your main process you fetch the data from your main source application, but then you divide it into 5 sub-processes to process each process. You can use this component individually and then push it to target system that you maintain modularity and everything. When you use dynamic process property, if you set up some dynamic process property in your main shape, main process, you can use that value in any of these 5 sub-process also. Anywhere, suppose you have set it up here, dynamic process property. Starting from this point, this shape anywhere in your process further, you can use that. If you set it up over here somewhere, suppose if you set it up over here at this point, then it's only allowed to be utilized in the shapes after it, be it like 10 sub-processes or no sub-processes. You're going to stop shape. It will work only for shapes after it. It will not be applicable on shapes before it. That is the use case of this dynamic process property, where you set up variables which you can reuse in your integration later. Then you have a process property which you set up to use for your environment extension for your, suppose your integration is deployed for some connection change or for some filters that you're setting up on your integration. You do not want to come back and modify it again and then redeploy your integration. You set it up using process property, where it allows you to change these values at runtime of your integration. When you're promoting your integration, you don't need to come back, modify it to the latest set of threads URL. You can simply pass it in this process property extensions. There is a use case of it. Again, profile element is simply selecting the field. It can be any profile and any kind of field. You can just get the output something like this. Next one is sequential value. When you are building some logic, sometimes you just want some kind of serialization or something like a serialization as in just simple basic sequence numbers or something 1, 2, 3 like 4, something like that. You can control it using the sequential value. You can configure it. Then again, SQL statement is for connecting some DB, performing some lookup. Static is for a hard-coded value which you want to set up and use. Suppose you are setting up some kind of flag checks. If your process got executed and it came until a certain point, then you can set up this value flag as equal to 1 or 0 and later in some below branch. You can set up a decision statement check if the flag value is 0 or 1. Accordingly, you can decide like true, false kind of path for it again. Then again, your stored procedure is basically for calling your local system and everything. Again, it's very less used because this consumes a lot of time. we try to fetch data separately rather than instead of all this map, shape or set properties or somewhere else. Unique value is your random number generator, where you know it is essential for every like document that you are sending your target system. Sometimes you are trying to associate some ID with a transaction ID or something. You can use this unique value. It will randomly generate a number and assign it. Any questions on this? You got some clarity? In dynamic process, just a little. Am I audible now, Rishi? Now you are. In dynamic process property, we can give the process name and the default value. Not mandatory. Default value is not mandatory, but let's say we give the process name as salary. Salary from the current document or something. I cannot hear you completely. Can you repeat? In the property name, let's say we write salary. It takes salary from the current document itself. This is just a variable definition, something like this. It would go. Now again on this, you can set up any parameter value. Again, you can set up some, you can reference it out or simply assign a profile element value to it. But you do not use profile elements with dynamic process property because it will not hold it against that document. ID this value. It will only take the latest document's value and pass it along your whole integration. That would become wrong because suppose some document number X, Y, like 3 documents are flowing in. It will only take the latest value of document Z. It will ignore the value of document X and Y. Here in dynamic process property, you use something like for timestamps. You can store something like TDP current date, where you know you can utilize this or you can name it as some kind of threshold for comparison. Therefore, salary threshold. There you know, in your decision shape or business rule, you can say threshold, whatever salary is coming in from source can be checked against this threshold salary, which is stored in dynamic process property. Something like this. For current scenario, when we are splitting the data, we are storing the employee ID. We are doing it by checking the type as document property, not dynamic process property or any other field. Yes, go ahead with we are doing it using the dynamic document property because that allows you to track your board with a question. basically in background. Dynamic document property sets up like a pointer to each document ID. Whereas dynamic process property only sets the pointer to the latest document. It does not bother by the previous documents. Whatever is the latest document ID it has received, it will point to it. We never use it for storing anything related to documentary level information. We store it for all other purposes, for some kind of business comparison logics or checks. We use dynamic process property. Now, this is one level of comparison which you asked dynamic document property, dynamic process property. Now you can also say, instead of dynamic process property, why am I not using process property? You are saying something. You can type in your question as well. If I think your audio is breaking a little, that's what you're saying when you're trying to use the employee by using dynamic process property, you would only get the latest record. That's correct. Because as I said, it only sets the pointer to latest document. If you want. Now, is it clear the difference? Another one is process property. The difference between dynamic process property and process property is process property allows you to have audit trail. Basically revision history. Whereas for dynamic process property, whatever you modify, it will come under your whole process level audit trail. This revision history. This allows you to, check who modified it and something but process properties are set, used when your integration starts executing. Whereas using dynamic process property, your integration is going to take 1 hour to run. Once it's started in between, you can pass the dynamic property from your environment extensions and it will pick up the latest value from the dynamic process property. You can modify it twice, try it anytime. That is its use case. In comparison to process property, but we avoid setting things up in such a way where we have to disturb, the process execution midway. We ensure we build it dynamic in such a manner that it's already being handled inside our integration design. Now, I was talking about this date time thing here. About this last successful run date. You do not want to use this. There is another option which we majorly use is of setting it up here. Suppose for integration, you want to then and again capture the last successful run date of whenever it was last executed and store that date time and reuse it for your next execution. Whenever your process is run, next it will only pick up the data which is modified after your last fetch from the source system. Suppose your integration run at 6 a.m. It is running at 6 a.m. every day like Monday and Yam. Then again at let's say 2 p.m. Similarly, it will happen on Tuesday, then on Wednesday, 3 days. It is running throughout week. We can say anything. Now, when your integration is running, suppose it breaks in between. It came to Tuesday. Monday got successfully executed. Tuesday, your 6 a.m. run, it failed. Using this, you can control for it to fetch the records again from previous day 2 p.m. Basically, you write it something like this DPP. A timestamp something like this, and you persist this value, and this is how it's configured essentially. Let me just give that. Now this value is persisted, and you can use the variable you configured for this execution in your next execution with this persisted property. It's allowed to use it in your next run. This timestamp you can then configure to pick up the data from this date value. When you have multiple runs in case, if anyone breaks it will use that persisted value again and pick up the data back from it. Did it make sense? Think it of as another way. Your integration is supposed to run at 6 a.m. every day. It is scheduled for it. But for the past Monday it was success. Your timestamp got stored. Say today is what? Thursday. Monday was 11. You stored the timestamp on it. It got stored as 11 November. Tuesday, your integration failed. But your business doesn't need you to run it again immediately. Then again, your integration ran on Wednesday, but it failed due to some maintenance or something. When, again on Thursday, your integration is running at 6 a.m., it will pick up all the data from this timestamp for 11th November. It will not just be restricted to fetching the data from Wednesday because that would be wrong. It will pick up everything after your Monday 6 a.m. run that whatever changes came in between last 3 days, it will pick up everything. And then again, this will get reset here to 14th November. Otherwise, you will miss on these 2 days data, which would be incorrect. That is the use case of this. First is the property sitting in conjecture with current date. Is it clear now? And we heavily use this where we want to fetch last modified data, since these kind of things. Yes, Rishan, that's true. There is this options of extensions for your deployed integrations where you can enable these settings and configurations. Basically, since we do not have any connections, otherwise you will get options of extending it here. Your properties, connection operations, all these kind of things. For this integration, we have CRT enabled. Let's enable that. Click. Also, let's go to a process. Let's add a process property for now. Create. It's named as IND. What we name? Demo. EMAP data, employee data. Let's add something just for fun. Time zone. Hold value India. Let's just save this. Let's add another field which we call it time zone. Now in our map, let's also provide a mapping for this. Go by properties. We do a get process property since we are fetching it, not setting up something here. We choose this one. Set up time zone. We just map something like this. We can come here, edit it. Again, now we also have process properties enabled. We can also get to choose which one we want to enable here. In this configuration, we can restrict that as well. Now we save it. We again box our integration. We just name it version 2.0. Create package component we just deployed. We already have a div. Next we review. Next we deploy. Let's view the deployment. Let's first do this compare deployments. You want to compare the current 2.2 version with another revision 1.0. It will tell you the difference. Like this, audit trail differences about what got changed. They were changed to the employee XML profile. To the map function was a change. Process property was a change. This got updated. The main process got updated. CIT was a new addition. There was no component revision or modified by date modified. This is how you can see all this information. This also comes in handy when you are, some higher environment like stage or in production where you want to compare previous deployments. Because sometimes there is some misstep or something. There you check like when it was modified or exactly what components were touched. This comes in handy then comparing deployments. Now let's go to our atom management. Go to environment extensions where we can configure all these properties. Let's process filters. Let's simply select our main process. We don't have any connections. Enable it. We only had process properties and cross-reference enabled. If I select this override init department job put, I can modify things here which will override the existing in values in your integration. If I do it like this, instead of taking just engineering as eng, it will take it as eng1. Whatever I set up here will be prioritized over the values configured in back end. That is about using it. Now, whenever there is some update by your business teams, say they are updating some kind of code, instead of SD1, they want to call it SD2. Instead of SD1, they want to call it SD1. They just want to call it HRAIT, something like this. Or this one to specify it belongs to which something like this. You can override all this without going to go back in your integration, modifying it, running test, then again creating a package component, then deploying it. Each time you're only increasing the amount of resources being utilized, more audit trail for yourself and everything. With this, you keep it simple. You can come in, change your value at any time and make it like, reusable things. Similarly, for your process properties, you come here, select your process property. You don't want to use default. You want to use something from here. Salary, suppose you're doing some comparison. For this month, the reports they just want it to be with 50,000 only threshold. Say for next month, they can come back and say at the start of the month or towards the end, just change it to $75 in or drop it further. You can configure it here without having to go back and disturb your integration and deployment. Suppose you are sending a time zone. You just want to pass some value, like where your employee's record is getting updated, just something like that. Some drop down case you can select like this: India, America, London. It would select the timestamp which we configured behind like IST, SST or GMT. That value would be sent something like that. If we click on extension saved, let's see if we are able to run it. Let's go to process reporting. Let's go back to build here. Execution got completed. I click on view process logs, I'll be able to see. It got finished, but we did not see any data. Now, during your testing, if you want to see data, you would just simply remove this. Use written documents in your main process to just see output. Deployment is done. Go to item management, select your item deploy process, click on execute process. We've come to a process reporting. Refresh it, refresh it. Now, if you see, thanks to written documents, even for your testing, you can now see the output exactly. Had there been like we had not combined, our outputs, you would have seen multiple documents. But since we combined, we'll see the combined document. If you see, we modified it all this. Instead of engineering, we've said eng1, then d1. We added time zone as well from the project property. It got added, it's a rough. And all these kinds of changes we are able to do. Now again, if I want to play around with these values, I don't need to go back, do the whole deployment process, the tedious task and everything. Again, simply come here always to my item management, change the value here to anything of my choosing. And I'm done simply. I don't need to be again, going through whole process. this is much quicker now. In our design patterns, we need to make the modular as much as possible that at any time we can perform our changes quickly and trigger the integration without having to go through the whole deployment process. This will come with practice only eventually, where you learn what all you want to know, make it dynamic and configurable at runtime like this, that you don't need to deploy your integration again and again. Please do like, share, and subscribe to our channel. For more information, contact us sales@therightuptalk.com.